So, you just ended up picking up a few books, decided on a particular game system. Maybe even gone so far as to end up gaining a few players. Maybe you are one of those players new to the hobby. Now, this fear, this worry ends up coming along a lot. How do you avoid being boring? I mean, let's be honest here, right? If we're talking about pro wrestling, something like that, which, there's a lot of parallels between role playing games and, well, those men in spandex for some reason. You can be anything you want. You can be the ravening barbarian joining the collective horde, as well you should be. Or maybe you're the mysterious wandering minstrel. Maybe, just maybe, you're that person who looks into the arcane and sees the passage of time as nothing more than a fleeting obstacle, because you end up knowing those realities that mere mortals dare to dream of. Maybe you're just a predator hunting along the nights, feasting upon the blood and the corrupt and the innocent. It's all the same to you. After all, they are prey. What you don't want to be is boring. Now, a few ways we can end up discussing this. I want to talk about three. That from the player, okay, that from the character, and that as the storyteller, the GM, the DM, or flame tender. So, how do we start? Well, the first thing you're going to need to end up knowing is that the one way you can end up helping yourself before you even worry about what everybody else is thinking about you, what you need to do is help yourself. So here's what I'm going to suggest. First off, sit as close to the GM as possible if you're saying in a live role-playing game. This is assuming you're playing tabletop, not LARP, but you'll understand in a minute. This can be applied in a few ways, but I'm going to assume you're playing tabletop. When you're here positioning yourself, try and sit as close as you can to the storyteller, to the GM, whatever you want to end up calling them. The person who's running the game. The reason is that when they're looking, more often than not, when they start, they'll almost always end up starting with the people on the right or their left. If you're sitting in a circle or any kind of regular kitchen table, typically, this is one of the best ways to end up situating yourself for you to start getting that bit of attention. And really all you need is that modicum of interest. And sometimes just where you're sitting can make all that difference. Well, another one, and this is going to sound so weird, is when I ended up hearing this, I was kind of like, you got to be kidding me. That's going to make a difference? Posture. Well, what the heck is this? Are we trying to be classically trained to sit proper and, Yes, the calamari is quite nice, though. I really wish I didn't have to eat it with my fingers. No. What I'm talking about is if you're, like I actually am, despite what you might be seeing, oftentimes kind of hunched over, and maybe your elbows are just resting on your legs and you're just kind of hunched over. You kind of muddle to yourself. Maybe you look up at the ST, but as soon as he looks at you, you look away. You're nervous. Fully understandable. The first thing I would suggest to you is straighten up. Straightening up does a few things. One, your emotions are, believe it or not, oftentimes being told by your posture or how you present yourself. So it could be something as simple as how you're standing, how you're moving. So sitting upright, believe it or not, will end up helping you pay attention. It gives you a bit more presence in the room. So that lets you capture the attention. Like I said, you're just fighting for that modicum of recognition. Because once you get that modicum of recognition, you can start gaining the practice in the more interesting bits. It also gives you this bit where you come across as a lot more confident, but more importantly, your emotions can be affected by your body. Because of this, you can end up taking advantage of the fact that when you end up standing a little bit straighter, you might be a little bit more boisterous. You might be a little bit louder. You might enunciate your words a little clearer and not just speaking softly and kind of, well, I guess I open the treasure chest and see what's inside. I hope it's that +3 longsword of douchebaggery. No. What you want is a character that, with authority, ends up deciding, I'm going to kick that lid open. Well, why would you end up kicking the treasure chest lid open? Mimics. Then it eats your leg and all that kind of stuff, but that's a whole nother rant. The other bit is be animated. Believe it or not, much like the posture will affect the way you end up presenting, the way you end up maneuvering, much like you might see in my videos. Sometimes I'll speak with my hands. Can't help it, partially French. Go figure. But if you're speaking with your hands, you're being a little bit more dynamic, I guess I can say. You can be louder, larger than life. And the weird thing is that if you're playing in character and you start saying, oh man, I just grab him, I start wringing him out. Well, two things are going to happen. One, you're definitely going to catch a little bit of attention. Second is the group might think you're out your damn mind, but you want to know what? Guess what? You've avoided being boring. Another thing is social cues. Not all of us were born with the ability to recognize basic social cues. And no group can be more awkward and awesome than a bunch of geeks around a table rolling dice, pretending to be elves, dwarves, orcs, humans, halflings, running down a tunnel with nothing more than a torch, going after a whole bunch of goblins who have nothing more than a loincloth and a tree branch as a weapon. Trust me, nervousness, it's going to happen. But you can get past that, like I said previously. These little things about being a little bit more animated, standing up a little straighter, getting, stretch out, do what you need to do. But if you're sitting near the GM, you're making a little bit more animated features. Boring? Last thing you're going to be. Last thing as a player. Forgive yourself. I know. This sounds like something me trying to be heartwarming and fuzzy. Might be. What I would end up saying, though, is that, especially if you're a new player and you're worried about being boring, don't worry if you accidentally crank it too high and break the dial. Don't worry if you can only turn it from a 0 to a 1. Just keep going. You're going to get someone's attention at that table, and that someone's attention at the table can be used to end up building some great scenes, especially if you're new to it. It's something you can build up. And I've seen it before several times. Those players that just hang back and stay in a monotone voice, and say what they're going to do. I guess my character Bob ends up opening up the treasure chest. Yeah, you want to know what? But if that person says, I guess Bob opens the treasure chest, well, that just turned it up just a little bit. Just that little tiny monicum. But now all of a sudden you're a little bit interested. That's what you can do as a player. Let's talk about the other venue here, the characters. First off, make a personality. Okay? Don't just say, oh yeah, you know, Bob, he didn't like dwarves. If there's a dwarf in your party, it is on you to make that person sit, not the person, that character's life a little less comfortable. You keep looking at them. you know, perfect example. Do you want me to get a box? When you have a character that has a distinct personality, you'll find that oftentimes people will play into it. Now, a boring person will do none of that. What they'll do is they'll sit in the back, probably as far away from the GM as possible. Might even have their head low, pull out their phone and my turn to attack. Oh, 15. Oh, it hit. Okay, well, let me. Okay, 16 points of damage. Don't be that guy. That guy has no interest whatsoever to be at the table or for anybody to invite him back. However, the person who ends up deciding to end up saying, I'm playing Bob and he hates dwarves. That's just a part of his personality trait. Maybe he hates dwarves, but God damn it, he's got this thing for bar wenches. And he'll always treat them like princesses. Just two things. But every time that situation happens, you know Bob has ended up treating that bar wench like she's freaking royalty. Meanwhile, that dwarf in the party is getting heck every single time. Quite possibly in front of the beer wenches. 2. Make decisions. When in a party, a lot of people end up making the mistake of, I'm going to sit back and I'm going to listen to what the group's going to do all the time. Not to say you got to push the group or spearhead every single encounter, no. But what you do want is the moment where here's a decision I think is very interesting and actually ends up drawing that this character is a little quirky. Not stupid, just has a preference that goes against the grain. Or maybe goes with the grain with adamant and vicious purpose. Maybe. Either way, if you are being involved, especially when it comes down to your GM, it'll come back and pay back dividends. Now, that being said, personal space has a little bit to do with it, so let's talk a little bit about that. When you're building a character, don't feel the need that the second the attention is off you to jump into it. Sometimes the situation is specifically between two characters that are not involving you. Let them have their space. Believe it or not, showing that little bit of respect will come back to you. So that way, when it's that heartbreaking moment where you've found out that the village that's been raided is your hometown, and you have that last moment with your mother who was choking because she's, well, been burnt in her own hut, and you hang on to that body. You're talking to her. You're not going to have the one guy on the outside and it's like, okay, we're moving on to end up looting the next corpse. No. Give that personal space. And then when it's your time to shine, it can come back to you. Last two things. Set a goal and have a clear weakness. Oftentimes, what I end up finding is the barbarian who has charisma as a dump stat. Or maybe the Bruja, who's not exactly the most mindful individual because he's all physical and social. You know, he's a force of personality. He knocks down doors, he knocks heads, and that's what he does. When the character has a goal, suddenly what I was talking about earlier, where making decision, making personality, comes into play. Because oftentimes you'll end up with situations where your goal may not be necessarily the same goal as the rest of your party. And you might actually come to a point of difference. That argument is not a bad thing. Okay, I've seen this before. My character would want to do this, but the group wants to do this. So to not make conflict, I am going to go with the group and not say a thing. Believe it or not, these kinds of situations can happen, and they are a perfect time to end up having that in-character discussion, so long as the sky is not raining lightning bolts or something's not trying to eat you. You can have those moments. You can have those moments of tension and disagree. Which way is it going to go? Especially if you have an entire group who is a little bit passive, and now all of a sudden you feel the need to do this thing, right? I've heard about my village that I was born and raised of being burnt, but you for some reason want to end up continuing out here because this legendary sword might end up having us kill the big bad. Well, my objective right now is to see if my friends and family are okay. So you're going to end up having that discussion, that argument, maybe. Don't make it go 0 to 60. Don't, club somebody over the head over it. Just give your character a set of goals. Because now all of a sudden, now say this is an ST, GM, whatever term you want to use. When I watch two characters arguing, I mean specifically characters, not players, I will sit back and just marvel at what's happening. I absolutely love it because that's the things where you get to see the party dynamics start to build. And that gives me a little bit of a breath of fresh air because I don't have to create content. The players are creating their own content. And I will tell you right now, GMs love that. They love the fact that you have officially taken any entertainment value they're worried about producing and just you started making your own. Within reason, of course, because, there might be some particular points that might be an issue. And have a clear weakness comes up. Earlier on, might make a video about this, somebody ended up discussing dump stats. Your character having a clear weakness is not a failing on your part as a player. In fact, it could be one of the most dynamic things and the thing that sets you apart from the rest. You don't want to end up making the average rogue with, a 18 to 20 dexterity and all this intelligence to end up making sure that you have max skill points and just you have all these skilled and you can do anything and trap find and all this kind of stuff. You know what? Set the bar against yourself a little. What's that key weakness? Right now, one of the characters I've been playing for a year is a Malkavian in Vampire the Masquerade 20th anniversary. The thing that's unique about this Malkavian is that this Malkavian is incapable of learning one of the three powers that his clan, his class, if you will, is capable of using. Now, they have three. Dominate or Dementation, depending on which version of Malkavian you're playing. Auspex, the ability for super sight, seeing auras and seeing into things, holding an object, figuring out where it's been, just this otherworldly perception. And Obfuscate. Obfuscate is the ability to say, I'm invisible. No one knows I'm here. I can disappear at a moment's notice. They're kind of the undead tricksters. If that trickster was Jason Voorhees with a machete and thought that you losing your entire family might be funny. They're not comical. They just like to play pranks that might get you killed. They're psychotics. But you never know when they're coming because they can be anywhere or everywhere. Maybe they just want you to feel that bit of paranoia. There is a lot they do with obfuscate. That ability to just gone. So what happens when you end up having one of these characters who cannot do that? Something that is taken for granted in every single Malkavian. Suddenly, your character doesn't have the ability to just run around into the alleyway and disappear from sight and be gone. You don't have the ability to just run away or keep hidden and stay out of trouble if it's a little too much to handle. You need to find another way about it. Now, when your character runs into this situation, they're going to have to adapt. How does your character adapt? How do they change? What is it that shifts? Because that will end up making it interesting. That Malkavian I'm playing ended up shifting by ended up being trained by a gangrel to use fortitude. Instead of running, instead of hiding, instead of lurking in the shadows, now he is the one who's up front. He's the one that's in your face. He's the one who is a bit of a wrecking ball coming forward. He had to find some way to adapt to the fact that he can no longer hide from the slings and arrows. So now he can take those slings and arrows. How a character adapts because they have a clear weakness, something that they're just not that good at, that's expected of them. Now, this could be in the form of a dump stat. Good example, if you're talking in D&D terms, the rogue with maybe 8 to 10 dexterity. Well, I thought that was their primary stat. Yeah, it can be. But what kind of a person would you be if you had the skills of a rogue, but not that dexterity of a cat burglar? How would you go about it? What would you change? Well, when one door closes, another one opens. So what is that primary bit? Maybe charisma. Ooh, charisma. What are you? You wheel and deal. You are the person who writes the contract. You're the one who ends up dotting the T's, crossing the I's, and leaving the fine print. Maybe it's strength. You got a few levels in fighter. You're not a cat burglar. You're a hardened convict. Got out of a penal colony after 8 years and then ended up being on the run. This isn't the kind of guy who sneaks up, cuts a small hole in your coin purse, and steals the coins. No, he walks up to you with a blackjack and, well, I don't need to pickpocket you because you're unconscious. I'll just take that now. These are the characters who adapt because of a weakness. And I can guarantee you, when that weakness becomes apparent, you can start playing around with it. And what you come up with becomes a little bit more unique, something worth the telling. Long stretch. We're on the final stretch. Storytellers. First thing, if you were one to avoid being boring, involve your players in the plot. This sounds so obvious, but I cannot tell you on how many original STs I've run into, and more GMs, I would say, actually. GMs and DMs I've run into who, when they start, they have this story in their head, this massive epic. Except it was written for them. The players, on the other hand, are just there to bear witness. If I'm here to listen to you rattle on for a story, much like you've been listening right now, if I don't keep you engaged, you're moving on. That's it. You don't have time to waste. You need to figure this shit out, and you need to figure out this shit quick. So, Involve the players. First off, take them out. Ask them, what kind of stories do you like? Get to know them. I personally absolutely love tragedy and personal horror. I love zombies. I love gore. I love body horror. You want to know what? My idea of a weekend is to end up sitting there with a nice rum and coke and end up watching Hellraiser movies. That's my favorite idea for a weekend. So my GM might want to play on that. As a GM, maybe you know some guy who, or a girl for that matter, who might be interested in the occult, Cthulhu, or larger than life mythos, maybe involved in the Final Fantasy series. Maybe they enjoy poker, right? The idea of bluffing. Watch what they do. Involve the characters, because if the characters going about all of this, they need to be invested. And if they helped in building a little bit of the world, maybe if they help not only build the character but their background, and you start taking that background, taking that elements that your mother getting involved in, your great uncle, here's your mentor that you grew up in the priesthood with, who knows? But get them involved, get them to know, and start caring about things. And suddenly, when those things end up coming into the picture, that is the plot, they're ready to jump in. 2, set the example. If you want to end up making sure that you're not being boring, engage and get your players to engage with you. Start giving them one-on-one time. Start giving them a reason. That you alone are set to deal with this challenge. It is up to you on how the rest of this bit goes. Doesn't necessarily need to be a one-on-one combat, though it could be. The rest of the party is caged. And it comes down to the wizard with no spells and a knife to end up getting the keys. Meanwhile, the vicious guard dog has been set loose, expecting to tear him apart. What does he do? What does he do? Well, those moments end up making it very interesting. 3, give the characters interesting choices. Because when you end up having the ability for choice and you're invested, you're going to start paying attention to those small things. You're going to start worrying about what's what and who is involved with what. It's difficult for me to think you're boring when you've just put a life and death situation in front of me, or you ended up putting me in a position where I might have my character have to compromise their moral integrity. Or worse yet, a character with no moral integrity suddenly has to act in a moral way despite the groans and face palms he might end up enduring. 4, the one thing, this is a huge warning, because I've seen this happen, and I've seen this happen so many times. Don't pander to your characters with experience or magic items. Watch your players, and if you end up noticing that the only time they get excited is when they're looting the bodies, or they're asking, how much experience did we get? You're not really involving them. There's a good chance. Or if you're trying to, they're not paying attention. If you've done all of this, I'm pretty sure at that point they're just there to roll some dice. In which case, if that's the kind of game you're into, fine. But understand that if that's what you're waiting on, you're not getting involved. You're just waiting there to end up putting more dots on a sheet, more +1s next to your item levels. You're waiting for that one more level. You're waiting for those a few more skills, maybe that few more spells. If that was your interest, my suggestion would be go play a RPG on any computer. I hear WoW's still popular because that's what it is. and probably more engaging in that regard because clearly you're not engaged at the table. What that person is again this guy. 16 and 22. Oh, I hit. Okay. 12 plus 15. Well, 27. Why do I have to do math? I don't care. 27 points of damage. Yay. And that will be the face I'll be making to this person. Anyway, I'm hoping you end up taking something from this. If I would end up leaving you with one thing, involve yourself. Step forward. Be brave. Go easy on yourself. Take the plunge. And most of all, don't worry about being boring when you're already jumping into the pool.